and welcome. In this week's interview, I am extremely excited and nervous, but happy, nervous to introduce to you my dear mother. My mother is the core of my strength, and I am extremely thankful for her. So, I am so happy that she's willing to do this interview today as we continue on my journey of giving a voice to family members and friends and relatives who know me very well and have had their own experience and interactions with a narcissist. And that narcissist being my ex, whom I was married to for 30 years and have been divorced for 3 years. So I want to welcome everyone to my mother. Hi, Mom.
Hi, Marcia.
Hi. So welcome and thank you. I appreciate you doing this. We are here to talk about your impressions, observations, perceptions of my life as it pertains to my relationship with my ex-husband and where we are today. Okay?
Okay.
All right. So I would like to start by asking you if you could talk a little bit about how you knew me as a child.
As a child, you were our darling daughter. We loved you so much. We took you everywhere we went. I took you to every event that I could think of taking you to, and I considered you my best friend. Um, you you always seemed to have a lot of friends. People really liked you, liked being around you. You were a very, I would say, ambitious girl as you entered college. After your first year, you got a scholarship. You paid your own way through college, through the rest of your undergraduate degree, and you just performed very, very well and still have a lot of friends. Kind to your parents, except for those, little teenage things that girls always do when they turn into teenagers. Once you ran away from home and I told you that you had to come back, and so you did. But that was just a teenage thing that you went through. And other than that, I considered you a very good girl. You started working as soon as you were old enough to work, and you continued to work always. I never had to tell you to get a job. In fact, one time you called me and asked me if you had 3 job offers and which one should you take? And I told you should take all of them.
This is obviously where I get my ambition from and my drive from, which is you, because my mother is a philosopher. She is a PhD and was a professor several colleges at one time. So everything that you're describing reminds me of you when you described me. And so you were my role model. And like you said, that was your advice when I had 3 job offers. What's the question? Why don't you just take them all? And that's because my mother was a professor at one time at how many universities and community colleges?
At one time, I was a full-time professor at 2 universities, along with 3 part-time teaching positions at 3 other universities.
Yeah. So you start to lose count after a while.
Yes.
And so obviously that's where I got it from. And like you said, your advice was just do it all. And one of, we have several, what should I call it? Mottos or mantras from you. And one of them is just do it. Just do it.
Yes.
So that is
Yes.
absolutely how me and my sister grew up with that go get it attitude. Can you describe my personality? What type of person was I growing up and before I went to college?
You were a very giving person. When you got your first real full-time job and you got your first paycheck, you bought some things for me. And I thought that was so sweet of you. I like the way that you were a good employee as well. There was no slacking off. You were a model employee, really.
Hmm.
And even if there were people that you didn't like, you didn't show it.
Hmm.
So they didn't know it.
Right. Right.
So, like I said, you've always had following. You had people who were always with you, wherever you went.
Okay.
And I think at times that was a little annoying for you, but they never knew it. You just did your thing.
I think that's a super interesting point because it speaks to the beginning or the very early stages of my life where I learned to mask how I really felt about someone. So when you said that, if I didn't like someone, they didn't know it. What I hear in that is I was a people pleaser. So I didn't want them to know I didn't like them. So I would pretend that I did and I would please them, even though I had different feelings about them for whatever reason. And I don't think I was judgmental. I think that I picked up on something about their personality that didn't resonate with me as being a good person or a kind person or something.
Right,
So it wasn't a judgmental thing, but it was just a perception of who they were and whether or not that suited me in
right,
terms of a friendship or relationship.
right.
So that I'm so glad that you said that because those early stages of masking, this also reminds me of you
I was
because
going
you
to
are
mention that. I was
okay. So
going to mention that because
what were you
I
saying about?
I have been told that I'm very good at that. I'm always courteous and kind to people, whether I like them or not.
Of course.
So, yes, I guess that is masking, but I just get along with everybody. I don't know many people, if any, that I actually do not get along with.
Hmm.
So, yes, I think you got the masking from me.
And I don't think it's a bad thing in certain situations because, on the one hand,
Right,
like you said, you're just nice to everyone, regardless of our perception of them, which to me means you're not judgmental. You just have certain preferences.
right,
So I agree with that, and I feel the same way. So in that sense of masking, I would consider that appropriate and natural human behavior because everybody doesn't like everybody,
right,
and it's only the expressive people who are bold about that and who have no
right,
problem expressing that outwardly. But you and I
right.
would consider that rude. Okay. So, in that sense, I see masking as appropriate. Now, in the other sense of masking, it speaks to my ability to mask my feelings when I feel violated in some way, emotionally or verbally.
Hmm.
So I would tend to respond to a situation like that with masking. And that
Right,
might look like, "Oh, it's okay," or, "Oh, I don't take that personally," or, "Oh,
mm,
no, I didn't even hear what you said," or something like that. So that
right,
is masking because internally I might have felt like, "Did they really just say that to me? Oh my goodness, that wasn't nice." But I am not going to come out and say, "Hey, that wasn't nice, and I don't appreciate what
right,
you said."
right,
Same with
right.
so yes, this is a good conversation because I am recognizing more than I already knew how similar we are. And on a funny note, I always joke with you about that too, because some things that I notice in myself that I recognize come from you, I'm like, thanks, mom. Gee, thanks. Like, okay, I know I got this from my mom and I'm not
Right,
happy about it.
right, right,
So,
right.
so I recognize things, especially as I got older, that I'm a lot like you in a lot of great ways, and in a lot of ways that I'm like, you could have kept this one. Like I didn't need to I didn't need to adopt this trait or this gene from you.
Right, right. That's right.
So now let's go into my relationship with my then boyfriend. So
Mm-hmm.
I am off to college, the college of which you are a philosophy professor at. So,
Yes.
and this also, it's so parallel to my life in terms of how much I am like you.
Mm-hmm.
So, me going to school, going to college, and going to get my graduate degree, and even going to postgraduate school for my doctorate was just because that's what my mother did.
Mm-hmm.
Like, of course, it wasn't even a second thought. Once I knew what I wanted to do, I just automatically knew that I was going to have doctor in front of my name in the same way you
Uh-huh.
have doctor in front of your name. So that obviously didn't happen as far as completing my doctorate degree. My father became ill when he was diagnosed with cancer. And while I was in my first semester of my postgraduate working on my doctorate, that's when he was diagnosed. And I dropped everything and moved home to spend the last years with him. So, but it speaks to just how much I admired you and wanted to be like you.
Mm-hmm.
So here I am in college,
Mm-hmm.
and you are there as a professor. You meet my boyfriend. I actually brought him home one weekend. I brought him home and introduced him to you and dad. So, what do you remember about your first introduction to my then boyfriend, who I met pretty much the moment I arrived to college?
He was a star basketball player. Um, you became a star cheerleader. He was fine to me. I used to brag
Okay.
about my daughter is the captain of the cheerleaders, and she is dating the captain of the basketball team. So I was proud of that. You never had a problem getting boyfriends anyway. So it was just natural to me that you would find one right away.
Okay. That's a good point, too, Mom, because let's talk about that for a minute. I did have probably 3 or 4 boyfriends throughout high school before I got to college.
Mm-hmm.
And something interesting about that dynamic or that pattern was that I was always in a relationship with a boyfriend, but every boyfriend I had always wanted to marry me.
That's no, I didn't, but that's something else we have in common too. Uh,
Okay.
from the age of 14, my boyfriends always wanted to marry me.
Okay.
You're that kind of girl, that
What kind of girl?
the kind of girl that a guy wants to marry.
Okay. Okay. That is
You're
really
not
important.
that. You're not that. I think nowadays they call it a hookup. You're not. You're not that kind of girl. You're not that hookup that guys don't bring home to meet mom. You're the
Right.
kind of girl that guys do bring home to meet mama, and they want to marry you.
Right. Right. And that has always been my experience prior to college.
And
So
I
I,
didn't know that. No, I did not know that.
okay. Interesting. Interesting. But you knew I had boyfriends that I was always in a relationship
Yes,
prior to college,
yes,
as early as I was allowed to start dating.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And I think that's really significant for what we're about to talk about. I was always in a relationship. I was always adored by my boyfriends. And not saying they were always perfect relationships. I mean, I'm 15, 16, and 17. So they're not, perfect relationships, but definitely they were long-term relationships for a
Right.
young girl. So we're
Right.
talking a year or more always. And
Um,
one of my boyfriends before I went to college was a 3-year relationship before I went to college. Do you remember that he lived with us temporarily because his mother kicked him out of the house, and I felt so bad for him that I was like, please, 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 can he just stay with us temporarily? Do you remember that?
who was it? Do you know? Do you
Well,
remember who it
we don't want
was?
to say names just in
Oh,
case,
okay.
I don't want to say any
I do
names.
I do remember, yes, that one of your boyfriends wanted to stay with us temporarily, and I said, okay.
So here I am, 15, 16 years old, dating a boy who was out of high school
Okay.
and he had a job. Now, I
Okay.
know why you were okay with this, and it's because you were dating dad when you were 15 and 16.
I was 15, he was 20.
Okay, there we have it. And I was 15 and my boyfriend was 19.
I always considered you such a good girl. I mean, that's why it was okay for him to live with us because
Got
you were a good girl.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. And I remember dad was like, he was not okay with it, but dad followed your lead. He always followed your lead.
Mhm.
That was another dynamic of me learning that it's okay to have boyfriends. It's okay to have boyfriends who are older than you, and it's even okay for boyfriends to stay with us. Now, of course, there were,
Mhm.
circumstances, but still, I think that another family might say, absolutely not. I don't care what his circumstance is. I will buy a hotel for him before he stays in my house with my teenage daughter.
All my life, I think all my adult years, had a habit of adopting strays. I mean, it wasn't that he just wanted to come and live with us and I
Of
said,
course.
okay. It
Of
was
course.
it was a situation that he was in and he needed a home. And so,
Right, right. So it was legitimate for you because there were justifiable circumstances and it wasn't just,
right.
oh, you want your boyfriend to live with us? Come on over.
Oh yeah,
Right.
no, it was not that at all.
I'm 17 years old. Left home for the first time, even though home was only 30 minutes away from school, but my first time leaving home. And though I'm excited, I'm leaving everything I know, a boyfriend and everything else. So I am very vulnerable at this time. And that is the moment that I met my boyfriend who became my husband and now my ex-husband. I didn't initially seek him out. He sought me out.
Right.
Or when I say sought me out, and I wrote this in my book, I was literally by myself at night at the football field crying because I had ended my relationship with my boyfriend from home.
Oh,
He walked by and saw me at my most vulnerable state and started talking to me. And so, I'm being very dramatic right now when I say I looked up at this 6'7" basketball player and I said, my knight in shining armor has come
my
to
knight in
rescue
shining
me.
armor has
And
come
that was the
to.
beginning. But even though I initially attached to him emotionally because of my vulnerable state, I decided very quickly that he was the one. I'm going to marry him or I'm going to
Mhm.
get him to marry me because all of my past relationships, they all wanted to get married. Well, I choose him. I'm marrying him and he's going to want to marry me. So I went in to this relationship very blindly and very needily because I would always had a boyfriend, as we talked about, and I'm used to boyfriends wanting to marry me. So I'm assuming the
Right.
same goes here. Since I choose you, you're going to want to marry me. This also speaks to, as I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about it, this also speaks to my confidence, my self confidence. I had a lot of self confidence in terms of I know that I am a good girl, like you said, and you're going to want to marry me. So that's the role that I put him in pretty quickly. Your initial perceptions of him were great guy, and you looked at the external. He's this, he's that, he looks like this and looks like that. I mean, that's all you had to go by. And of course, that's pretty much all I had to go by as well. So we're both like, yay me, right? So tell me, when did you, and this is prior to us getting married, when did you see, or did you, let me not even lead you, did you ever see anything concerning about him?
You were always driven to do what was best for you. When we got concerned, your father and I got concerned, was when he wanted to move off campus into your apartment with you and your girlfriend. And at first, especially your father was absolutely not. And then he was saying, I love Marcia. I'm gonna marry her one day, but we just gotta get through college. And so promise you, this is him talking to your dad, that, it's not just moving in together, this is gonna be a permanent thing. And so he talked your dad into it, and we allowed it.
And what I hear in that is his ability to charm. Now, I still think he was sincere, but it doesn't mean he didn't have ulterior motives. But it speaks to his ability to charm and to engage with people, to present himself in a way that was acceptable to even my father. And my
Right.
father comes from a military background and is no pushover.
Right.
So this was him being able to convince my father, who was very protective of his eldest, most important teenage daughter,
Right.
that he literally lived with me before we married. And my
Right.
dad considered that shacking up. Ain't gonna be no shacking up in here. That's what
Right.
dad would say, right?
Exactly. Right.
And he was able to convince dad, who had firm beliefs that you do not live together before you get married. Okay, you can live together as long as you're going to get married.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a very interesting observation. So moving forward, we get married and we live our lives together.
Mm-hmm.
How did you feel? How did you feel when I moved away with him?
Not happy because I miss my daughter. Like I said, you were my best friend for a long time. Like I said, you grew up being a good girl. You just meant a lot to me, so I missed you, but that's what you wanted to do. And I'm the type of mother that if you want to do something, you figure out how to do it, and I'll support you. And that came with everything that you attempted. If that's what you really want to do, I will support you.
Mm-hmm.
And if it wasn't a good thing to do, I would let you know that. But I always still left the decision up to you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you wanted to do. So I said, okay. Yes.
Yes. So this is interesting too, because I've been told similarly by my sister and by friends who knew me in high school how ambitious I was, how determined I was, how independent I was. how driven I
Yes.
was and always, knew what I wanted to do, whether it was a job or boyfriend or anything.
Right.
Then I enter a relationship with someone who doesn't allow that. I find that very interesting because from the start of our relationship, he presented himself as very confident, very self-assured slash self-absorbed and in need of attention, which he got as a basketball player, which he got on college campus, which he got from me being his girlfriend. Here I am in a sorority and I'm a cheerleader. So that catered to him as well. So
Right.
though I was vulnerable, I carried with me to college before I met him all of these characteristics that we just talked about. And now I'm in a relationship with someone who demands authority over me. And for some reason, I'm willing. And I find that very interesting. Other than the fact that because I was determined that he was the person I was going to marry, so I bring with me the baggage of all my previous relationships where that was, just what every boyfriend wanted. So this one's going to want it too. And when he didn't initially present that way, I immediately went into, well, I'm going to make him want to marry me. And this is, as much as I know this internally, talking about it out loud with you even resonates more as we make these comparisons. Because I've often wondered, looking back, why was I so determined that he was the one? And now I see why. It's because you're supposed to want to marry me. And why are you acting like you don't? Something's wrong with me that you don't want to marry me. So let me change. Let me
Mm.
conform so that
Okay.
you do want to marry me.
Okay.
Interesting revelation here. Interesting. What do
And
you think about that?
as you say, that is very interesting because I guess even from the beginning of your marriage, I saw you change into, I gotta do everything he says, and what he says is right. And this is the way it's supposed to be. I'm not one to interfere in my children's marriages, especially if they don't tell me that something's wrong, which you never did. I
Yep.
mean, you seem to think that all of that was okay.
Right.
And
Right.
even at times when I questioned you, you would defend him. So I'm just saying, okay.
Yep.
So
And my
it's
defeat.
interesting. It's
Go
interesting
ahead.
that you turned yourself into this person that wanted to make him your husband.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It is very interesting. I did literally change for him. I got the idea, as I mentioned earlier, that something must be wrong with me, that he doesn't want to marry me because I've never experienced someone not wanting to marry me before. And now that I am like, okay, you're the one, you're not falling in line like everyone else did. So what am I doing wrong? What am I doing differently? So that's my baggage bringing into the relationship. But on the other side, which you're not aware of or you were not aware of, is that this is how he groomed me.
Right, right. And you're absolutely right. I was totally unaware of that. I just saw
Right,
you changing and I thought you wanted to change. So
right, right. How did you feel about me changing? How did you feel about your observations of me turning into this, submissive person? And actually, before you answer, were you submissive in your marriage with dad?
absolutely not. My relationship with your dad was one respect for each other, total love for each other, a total caring for each other. We did everything together from the very beginning. We went grocery shopping together. We just did everything together. And even when you came along, it was the three of us together all the time. So it was weird to me that having come from a family where, I mean, he cleaned house just as much as I did. You would even say more. He went out of his way to do things for me without my even asking. That's what you came from. And so to marry someone who was not like that, who didn't go out of his way to please you, to take care of you. I mean, it was pretty much you had to take care of everything, including him, and you were okay with that. And I didn't understand that, but you didn't tell me there was anything wrong with that. You seemed to be okay with that.
And let me tell you why. Because it blended, husband at the time's expectations of me blended with my expectations of myself. Dream was to be the best mother and wife that I could possibly be. So because I was so determined to be such a good wife and such a good mother, if that meant doing everything, if that equated to being seen as the best mother, I wanted to do that. If serving him was received as being the best wife, I wanted to do that. And so, unfortunately, at the same time, he took advantage of that. And that's the difference between my marriage and your relationship with dad. Is dad reciprocated even more so because he was more thoughtful than you. Like, you don't think to give gifts or, you know, do things, special things. I mean, he knew that you loved him. You guys loved each other very much, but you're not this overly thoughtful person when it comes to intimacy. And I don't mean sex, but I mean, you know, touchy feely. Let's talk about that. You are not touchy feely. You are not really type. So,
and I came from a family who was not touchy feely.
Right.
I didn't get hugs and kisses and all of that as I was growing up, but your dad was touchy feely. And I think that's one of the things that drew me to him was that he always had his arms around me, he was very affectionate.
And I saw that.
Even in public,
Right. And I saw that. That's what I grew up with. And so, you know, unsurprisingly, when you're being groomed by someone, they mirror what they have learned that you want or like. And actually, no, throughout our relationship, he was that touchy feely. He loved being close to me, always had his arm around me, public affection, all of that. He was that. But it came at a price, and the price was my submission.
Okay.
So it was conditional, whereas you and dad's love or relationship was unconditional, and it wasn't, there were no strings attached to his affection for you.
Right, exactly.
So it's making sense to me as to how I was easily groomed, because I shared this with my sister in my interview with her, that I saw a lot of dad in my husband at the time because he was mirroring that affection and that attention. He thought I was beautiful. He always thought I was beautiful. He thought I was so attractive, and he just really was just like, you know, he didn't hold back on compliments and expressing how he felt about me. And so now I can see why I saw him as like dad, because dad was that.
Okay.
I find it interesting that he recognized that that's what I wanted and needed, and that's what he gave.
Right.
And he he gave it more than I wanted it because I think I'm not a super touchy-feely person either. So I remember plenty of times where I really did prefer to sit on the other side of the couch. Hey, we're watching the same movie. I just want to sit over here. And he's
Right.
like,
I
nope,
remember.
come on over here. I
Yeah,
want you to be to me.
I remember that.
Okay. So, that feels good to be wanted like that and to be, for your partner to want you to be close to them. So
Yeah.
these are the things that I fell in love with. These are
Mhm.
the things that made me feel special. These are the
Mhm.
things that made me want to spend the rest of my life with him.
That's why it seemed okay to you for the conditions surrounding what he wanted from you.
Yes.
Um, you thought, oh, well, he's giving me attention, affection, closeness, all of these things. So everything must be okay.
And what's wrong with me submitting to him because of all of this love and affection he's giving me? I
Right.
should want to submit to him.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you perceive me as being submissive to your dad?
No, you did whatever the heck you wanted to do. And I mean everything from I'm going shopping and I'll be gone for I don't know how long. And then back then we didn't have cell phones. So dad would just wait in the living room. I don't know where your mother is. I don't know how long she's going to be gone. And I don't know. She'll be back soon. Let me get you some dinner. I mean, you did whatever you wanted to do because the two of you were so close. And like you said, y'all did everything together as well. He didn't mind your independence.
Okay.
He didn't mind your independence, and that's what made it work for the two of you. But in my
Okay.
marriage, my independence was suppressed. I accepted that it was more important to serve him, to make him happy, and it became perceived as selfish for me to be independent.
Okay.
So remember how you described me as having a lot of friends and I was ambitious and all of those things. Well, I was still ambitious because I got my degree and I went to graduate school. So I was still ambitious to an extent. So more and more my ambition had to be suppressed because in his eyes, well, if you're doing something that doesn't serve the family, then why are you doing it?
Right.
So, just as we talk about this, there were a lot of things because it's not all bad. Someone who loves you so much and is so affectionate and wants to be close to you all the time, that's great, right? I loved that.
Right.
That wasn't
Right.
bad.
Right.
Um, I went to graduate school in his hometown by choice. I was accepted at several places, and that was because of my empathy for him being away from home while he was in college, and I was only 30 minutes from home. Feeling bad for him not or having been away from home for 4 years, 5 years, um, my empathy led me to choose a college in his hometown, and that's what led us to moving to his hometown. He didn't keep me from going to school. He didn't keep me from working. He didn't keep me from getting my license. He didn't keep me from, he loved that I was successful
To a point.
there you go. As long as, and that statement, as long as, there's a long list after that, a long list after that. So,
Because I remember when you had an opportunity to take a position in your line of work that would really put you further along in your career, and it was a higher position and you wanted it, but he felt it would take too much of your time away from the family, which remember, you had to take care of the family, not him. So your time was taken away from the family, then that was not acceptable. And for that reason,
right.
you did not take the position. And you told me that was okay.
Wow.
I remember. I remember the things that even when I would question you, you would say, you would defend him. There were times when you two would have an argument and you would call me and you would say, well, he said this and he said that and he said this and he said, well, Marcy, you go back and tell him so and so and so and so. And you would say, I can't argue with him. I just can't. I don't know what to say. He can always one up me.
Yep. That is the story of my marriage. How did you feel when I would call you in distress like that?
It would upset me and hurt me to my heart that you could not stand up to this man. Because, as you know, I was not accustomed to anybody talking to me in a way that was unsavory. Even if you remember when y'all were kids, if you said something to me that was not well received, all I had to say was, Jim, and your mouth would shut completely. Don't call dad, don't call dad, don't call dad. You know, I mean, that was not acceptable.
Right. Right.
For you to think that that was acceptable, just couldn't believe it. And what could I do but to say, okay.
Wow. So interesting to hear your experience of my transition from who you knew me to be all the way up until I left for college and met him, and then to watch me change and morph into a completely different person. Interesting.
And I might add, your friends also noticed your morphing into this different person. You were different. You were different from from what your family knew you to be, from what your friends knew you to be. You know, so it was very distressing on the whole family and friend network.
Yeah. And like you said, I was so defensive slash in denial that I always knew my friends didn't like him. I mean, he is an overt narcissist.
Yes.
And overt narcissist is someone who is very proud of their conceitedness, their arrogance, their self-absorbedness, their self-centeredness. They don't hide it. They brag about it. You know, I'll never forget that when I was divorcing, kind of fast forwarding for a minute, sidebar, when I was divorcing, he said, "You're not losing a good man, you're losing a great man." That's how sure he was of himself. And I have to say, that's what attracted me to him, not at that point, but in the beginning, that's what attracted me to him. He was so confident. And that is one thing, interestingly enough, that I lacked. I did lack self confidence. When it came to me doing things I wanted to do, I was a go getter. But self confidence, I was lacking when it became social acceptance thing, a need for acceptance externally. That's when I lacked confidence. So his confidence, I used to always say, you've got enough confidence for both of us. So that's what attracted me to him. That was so attractive to me. And I actually wanted to be like him in that sense. I want some of that confidence. Can I have just a little bit? You actually have too much. Can I have just a little bit of that?
Yeah,
That's
right.
how I saw his confidence. And, you know, he gave that to all three of our kids. All three of my boys are just as confident in themselves. They love themselves, but it's not to the extreme of arrogance and overly self-absorbed in any way.
Right.
So I say all this to say, again, that there are good qualities that I was attracted to, and good qualities that he passed on to his children and to me. I think I gained confidence just by watching him. And sometimes I would mimic his confidence because I didn't know how to do it myself.
Right.
And even as I became a manager in my career, he was my mentor in the sense of how to manage people, because he
Right.
knew how to manipulate people. He was good at
Right,
manipulating.
right.
So I learned a lot from him, but I definitely knew that my friends didn't like him. I mean, nobody really liked him. They loved to hate him. He was such a hateable person in a loving way. It sounds weird.
You know,
And
let
oh,
me, but I did not dislike him.
right. You and
Um,
him had a great relationship.
we had a very good relationship.
So talk about that a little bit.
First of all, he was very respectful of me. Whenever I was around, he would make sure that I was having a good time, that I was comfortable, that I was getting whatever I wanted. I mean, he was very nice to me. Also, one of the things about him that kind of people didn't kind of recognize his arrogance and everything was because he was about having fun. This was
Yeah.
a fun guy. I
Yep.
mean, always the life of the party, always throwing party. I visited you once and I came down, when y'all were married and you had kids and the kids were little. And I came down with a cold, a very bad cold, flu or something. And so I was sick. Man, he wasn't having that. He said, Mom, I got you some medicine right here. You take this medicine and you go lay down and you get better because we're gonna party tonight and you gotta be straight for this party. And so, I mean, he was a party guy. He was fun. He liked to laugh and have fun and all of that. So, no, and especially even unlike your friends, they saw how he was, but I never saw that.
Right.
And you never told me.
Right.
Nobody ever told me. Your
Right.
sister saw it. She didn't tell me.
Okay.
You didn't even tell me that y'all separated. You just said that he was out of town. I said, okay. But he was gone for a long time. I said, well, when is he coming back? And you said, oh, I don't know. It's going on. So I'm saying that that's mostly why I had no feelings of dislike for him. I had no inkling of what was going on in your marriage. It was your marriage, and you were a grown woman. And if that's what you wanted, then that's what you wanted. So, yeah, we had a good relationship.
Yeah. And you're right. He loved you to death. And, uh, you were his second mom because his mom was in a different state. You were his second mom. And he definitely catered to you because I'm going to venture to say he catered to you more than he catered to me because he catered to you and I catered to him. So I don't know. You think I would deserve the catering too, but he absolutely catered to you.
Remember, he even threw me, well, you, your sister, and him threw me that my 60th birthday party. And
Yes.
he made this video of my life and all of these things and showed it on the TV and he DJ'd. And that's another thing he and I had in common was that we liked the same kind of music.
Right.
So he was always playing the music that I liked.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
he
This
was
is
very good to me.
right. This is the stuff that makes it so hard for the family to understand. I mean, you have every right to be like, well, what happened? Where'd our party guy go? I mean, he was making me a playlist. Where'd he go? Right?
Yeah, right, right.
It's so hard for family to understand. Therefore, hard for most families to support you. Now, you were different. You were going to support me no matter what, whether I was making a wrong
Right,
decision or a right decision, you were going to support
right,
me.
right.
But other families, and you never did this, other families who had this type of relationship with the narcissist would say, what are you doing? Why are you ruining your marriage? This is a great guy. Give him another chance, or go to couples counseling, or fix it. Why you're not going to find anybody like him. That's what other family members would say who have no inkling of what's going on behind closed doors. So as close as your relationship was with him, I feel so lucky and blessed that that wasn't the response I got from you. What was your response? I mean, I understand I didn't tell you anything, but when I finally told you we were divorcing, I don't remember what I told you or how much I told you. I know I didn't tell you the whole deal, but
No, no, you didn't tell me the whole thing, but I understood from, as I say, I watched you change into this person. And when you finally were strong enough to say, I'm done, I understood that completely. I didn't know why it took so long. Being this submissive person who did everything he said and thought everything he said was okay, and everything he did was okay. So when you finally said, I'm done, and like you said, I was going to support you anyway, but
right.
yes. And
Yeah.
now that I see the tremendous growth in you after being away from him, I mean, even before the divorce was final, when you finally separated from him, you began to flourish. Your independence came back. Your ambition was to the side. Your confidence, whether you got it from him or not, it was good.
Right.
You were able to live your life. And I am so proud of you and so happy that you can now live your life and you still love and cherish your children. You don't try to downgrade him to your children. That's their dad, and
Right.
you want it to stay that way. And I admire you for that. I admire you for everything that you are now doing and still going higher and higher. You're the daughter that every mother would love to have and would love to see the growth. And I'm glad that now you and I have the relationship that we didn't have back. But just to see you going through what you were going through was not pleasant. So what if I was not there? We didn't really talk very much.
I felt very isolated, but also purposefully isolated because there was a lot of shame and guilt about what I was experiencing in my marriage. And that's what a lot of victims go through or experience is, we shut ourselves off because, first of all, we don't want to have to accept it, that this is what's happening to me. And then I don't want to have to admit it. If I admit it to you, that means I'm saying it out loud. Now it's a reality. Now I can't deny it anymore.
Right.
So I always say denial was my best.
And yet you can't leave.
Exactly.
You can't deny it, but you can't leave.
Right. To be honest, I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to leave because just like my marriage, I didn't know what went on behind closed doors for you and Dad. So when you isolate yourself, you choose to believe this must be normal. This must just be what marriages go through. And then being told by your husband, this is what marriages go through.
Yeah.
So we're just going to work through this. And I'm being told, don't tell people our business. Now, don't let me forget that. That was a rule. Don't tell nobody our business.
Okay.
So, for example, because you and him had such a good relationship, He did not want that tarnished by me telling you what was going on in our marriage.
Okay.
I would have gotten in trouble, meaning I would have gotten disapproval. I would have felt disapproval from him, which was never okay or comfortable for me
Mhm.
if I broke that rule. So, the submissive person that I learned to be, I don't break any rules.
Yeah.
So, that was his doing, I want you to know.
Okay.
That you didn't know anything. Not solely his doing.
Yeah.
50% him, the other 50% was my shame and guilt and not wanting to admit that this was not the marriage that it appears to be. All of those things going on. So
Right.
it was a mutual
Yeah.
unspoken rule.
Right. And plus
So yes,
you didn't want to, I don't think you wanted to feel that your marriage failed.
exactly. And it's because your marriage didn't fail. And what have I been doing my whole life? Walking in your shoes. We started out talking about that, wanting to be like my mom.
Yeah.
Is it such a coincidence that you were married for 30 years to the day
Yeah.
before dad passed away of cancer?
Right.
I was married 30 years to the week. I was married 30 years to the week, not the day, but the week. And
Wow.
I just sometimes, especially during the divorce process and when it was finalized, I was like, wow, I was even married as long as my parents were married.
Wow.
And I think a lot of that was a motivator too. Like you said, not wanting to fail. I wanted to be married forever, but I especially wanted to be married as long as my parents were married. I didn't know
Okay.
anything else. I didn't grow
Okay.
up with a single parent. I grew up in a two-parent household. This is the way it's supposed to be. And
Yeah.
I'm going to do whatever it takes for it to be this way.
Right.
So I'm actually thankful. I say this a lot. I'm thankful that the last straw, we call it the last straw or the grand finale that led to our separation and divorce. I'm thankful that it happened.
Yeah. Me too.
Because, like you said, I truly have found my true self again. I
Mm-hmm.
could not be happier. I am living my absolute best life. I can't even believe how happy I am. And it's not to say that it was 30 years of sheer misery and torture. In fact, all I could remember was the good things when I left. I had to call Tasha, the one who doesn't forget anything, my sister, and say, can you remind me of why I'm leaving? Can you remind me of what he did, especially when I was writing my book? Can you
Mm-hmm.
remind me? I'm writing the chapter of how, the things that I went through, but I just can't remember. And that's because I chose to only focus on the good. So there was a
And
lot of
there,
there were absolutely a lot of good times, and I truly believed, and still to this day I believe that he loved me and loves me. I do believe that. I
mm-hmm.
just now understand that he is not capable of loving me in a healthy way.
Right.
But did he
Right.
love me and does he love me? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, my love, we've talked about how conditional our love was. And so
Right.
his love for me was very conditional,
Okay.
very conditional.
Okay.
And so that's not healthy love. And that's something else that's hard for victims to accept because we felt the love. But my sister, I'm thankful for her and how mad she stayed for 30 years, most of her life,
Yeah.
that she never forgot. And
Yeah.
she happily shared more than I wanted to remember
Yeah.
about why I was leaving. And that's why
Okay.
I'm grateful for my family. This will.
Free will.
You gave me free will. You were not ever judgmental.
Well, you wouldn't talk to me about it. And
That's right.
even though she and I talked about it, she didn't tell me the detail
Right.
of
Okay.
what was going on in your marriage. So I still didn't know the
she would come visit and he's going out every night and leaving me home with the kids. That would make her mad. And she would go in the bathroom and whisper to you, Mom, can you believe what he's doing?
Right. Right.
So, yes, yes. So honestly, even that even that made me withhold information.
Yeah.
Because of my fear of what you guys would think about it and what you guys would say about it. So
Right.
I was protective and defensive for those reasons too. But like you said, what else could we do other than talk to each other? Because you couldn't talk to me.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but
Well,
I'm so happy that you're happy now. I'm very happy. And you can be who you are instead of who somebody else wants you to be.
yes.
And that's the way you were before you married him.
Wow.
You were your own person and everybody liked you.
Wow. And I lost my sense of self so much so that even with him, when we would go to parties and have parties, everybody loved me. But I thought it was because of such a good wife that I was. Because you remember I said people love to hate him? What
Yeah.
I would hear all the time is, girl, how can you stand him? How can you put up with him? Oh my gosh, he's so annoying. So that to me was admiration that I was receiving, external validation that I was receiving from someone. I am so good that I can handle him. So
Oh.
I didn't think I was being liked just for who I am. I'm being
Oh.
liked because I'm an extension of him,
Right.
how
Right.
I saw it.
Right. Right.
So very interesting how the mind works and how it twists and you forget who you are. But this also speaks to narcissistic abuse.
Right.
This is what narcissistic abuse does to you. It
Right.
is literally damaging to your brain, so much so that you forget who you are.
Yeah.
And you said that in a nutshell. I forgot who I was.
Yes.
And I found myself when I left, and I couldn't have found myself until I left.
Right. Which now I understand. I was very unhappy when you left here and moved so far away. No, after,
After the divorce?
yes, well, when you
Yeah,
broke up, you broke
right.
up and you moved so far away,
1,000 miles away.
a
Do you
thousand
know
miles
why I
away.
moved that one?
Well, now I understand, but back then I didn't. And
What do you understand now about it?
that you had to get out of the whole atmosphere,
Right.
that you had to get away from him, far enough from him, so that you could just see yourself, so that you could find yourself again, so that you wouldn't be even close enough for him to even talk you back into it.
Exactly.
So now I understand. I still hate that you live 1,000 miles away because I love having you, and that's why I have to keep coming to see you, even though I know mothers have to let go. I love you so much, Marcy.
Thank you so much, Mom. I greatly appreciate you. I appreciate your ability to allow your children to be who they are because that wasn't my children's experience with their dad.
I know.
They were going to be basketball players, period.
Well, he even told me that they were his retirement plan.
That is right.
That
Oh,
they
my
were
goodness.
supposed to be stars, professionals who would take care of you and him after you two retired. And he drove them so hard, I thought they liked it.
Yeah.
Until
Well,
the owners once said, I'm not doing it anymore.
yep. Yep. Even that speaks to his self-centeredness, that his boys were going to live for him. And again, don't get me wrong. Just like there were plenty of good times in our marriage, there were plenty of times that the kids did enjoy basketball.
That's true. Yes.
They did enjoy a lot of it, but they have endless stories about how much they didn't like it. And their life speaks to it now because none of them, out of the three of them, none of them will pick up a basketball unless it's just to play around
Yeah.
shooting throws. I drove Devin by a YMCA and said, "Hey, you can go in there and play basketball." He said, "It literally just made me sick to my stomach, the thought of going into a YMCA to play basketball."
Wow.
Talk about PTSD. So, as much as I have found myself, I am happy that my kids have found themselves.
Yes.
They are all doing exactly what they want to do, and they are
Right.
all extremely happy. And it wasn't until I left to break what we call the trauma bond that it then freed them as well.
Very good. I never
And
heard that term before.
yeah, I'm also happy that the kids have a good relationship with their dad. They've
Yeah.
learned to accept him for who he is. They've stopped fighting him and fighting for themselves. They no longer have to fight. Now, of course, it took them to be old enough to be able to stand up to him and say, "No, you're wrong," or "I'm not doing this."
Right.
Um, but I think it's a testament to it's never too late.
Right.
Never too late. After 30 years of marriage for me, it's never too late. And
Yes.
now I am just so full of passion for what I do. I'm proud of the testimony that I have. I'm proud of
Yeah.
it
Mm-hmm.
because 30 years of experience, good, bad, and ugly, gives me the combination of my clinical background and my personal experience to help others. And that's my number one mission in life now. And it just brings me so much joy.
Right.
So thank you for being an amazing mother. You and I
Thank-
have been through a lot, and look where we are today. So,
Yes.
this is also important to me to share with the world that family relationships can mend after a
Yes.
narcissistic relationship. But, like you said, it took the removal of that space in
Yeah.
order for me to grow and for relationships to grow.
Right.
So, I'm thankful that I had the courage, and I will also credit you for that, for demonstrating that in
Thank
your life.
you. Thank you.
Yes. So I am very grateful for you, Mom. So thank you very much. And thank you for sharing and talking with me. Because this is not about bashing the narcissist,
No.
but it's just about the reality.
Yeah.
And thank you very much. I love you deeply.
I love you too, Marcy.